All right, welcome to this section. We're going to look at perspective today. So if you don't know what perspective is, that's totally okay. That's what we're going to learn about in this section. Last time we learned about just like tools and techniques for drawing straight lines, curved lines, stuff like that. And that's going to be really important when we're drawing objects in perspective. But for this lesson, we're just going to learn what perspective is, how it looks in the real world, how it looks in drawings, stuff like that. So today we're going to look at 1, 2, and 3-point perspective. Those are kind of the most three commonly most drawn ways when using perspective. We're also going to look at some terminology. We're going to look at what a horizon line is, vanishing point, station point, and ground plane. Alright, so I'm just going to pull up a little sample drawing we have here. So we have a little stick man standing on the ground with just a quick three-dimensional box. So I'm going to pull up a couple things here. It kind of looks busy when I pull it up. And I'm also going to keep the perspective grid on that I use to help draw this. So you can see there's like all these like little, sorry, get on the right layer here so I can actually draw. There's all these light colored lines, like there's one here, stuff like that. And that's just a grid that I can turn on to help draw for the sake of these examples. So you can see down here we have the ground plane. So the ground plane is basically just anything that you're standing on. So in this case, we have our stick man standing on this ground. So if this was his real world, this is the ground that he's standing on, and we would refer to that as the ground plane. When you look at his little eyes on his head here, you can see his eye line is obviously where his eyes are, and the distance between his eye line and the ground plane is called the station point. So if we were to draw what he sees this world from, we would draw it kind of what's in between these blue lines here. So that is his station point. If you look back at the grid in the background, you can see there's one line that doesn't have an angle. It just goes straight through the center of the page. Or sorry, not the center, but you can see it's right here. And there's no angle to it, whereas all the other ones, they all go off on angles. Okay, so this one is just straight, and we refer to that as the horizon line. There's horizon lines everywhere, no matter what you're looking at. If it's in a room, outside at a landscape, there's always a horizon line. And it's just where there's no shift in perspective, none of the lines would be on an angle. So right now I'm looking at a window in my room, and it looks like the top and the bottom of the window are on angles, but there would be a point that I could draw with my imagination through the center of the window where it would be straight relative to where I am. I hope that makes sense. You'll kind of see some more examples when we start looking at actual images. And the last thing is vanishing points. So you can see all of these lines, the grid lines used to help draw this, they all kind of go pointing towards one single point that's off the page. So on the right hand side you can see all these lines. I'll just draw a couple more. All of these lines, eventually off the page to the right, they're going to converge somewhere. They're all going to come and intersect at one point. And the same is true on the left hand side of this image. So if I start drawing lines here, because they're all on different angles, eventually they'll all come together and meet at some point off of the page. And you'll see some more examples of that in a second here. So I'm just going to turn these two layers off. Alright, so we're going to look at a couple examples of 1-point perspective. So in the example on the left, you can see that we have just a simple alleyway with a couple buildings, stairwells, stuff like that. And I'm just going to start drawing a couple lines following like what their straight lines are. Let's draw one on the stairs here. You follow the top of the building, follow the stairwell here. And you can see the more lines I start adding into this, you can see that eventually they're all going to meet somewhere around the middle of this picture. So this one's not perfectly drawn, but it's a pretty good example of all the lines coming together towards one vanishing point. So in this case, the vanishing point is here. And that means also in 1-point perspective that the horizon line would also be there on the vanishing point. So that's where if I were to draw a straight line, it would just go straight through the middle of the picture. Now let's look at the one on the right. So we have a very famous painting here called School of Athens, one of my favorites. And I'm just going to start drawing some lines on this one as well, following the straight lines from the building. So you can see there's like a ledge here that I'm following. Let's find some of these tiles on the bottom here. So in this case, all of the lines converge in the center of the image. And this one's a really good example because it also doesn't only use 1-point perspective as a way to like create three-dimensionality in the image, but it also uses it to draw the viewer's eye towards the center of the image with the two main characters. This one's a really, really good example. So again, we have the vanishing point in the center. The horizon line is the line that is not on an angle through the center of the images, and then all of these other lines lead towards the vanishing point. And they can be, like, they don't have to follow a line that exists in the image. I can just start placing lines on it, and these lines would help me draw or paint an image like this. Alright, so let's get the next one ready to go here. So in this one we're going to look at 2-point perspective. So in the last one, all of the lines converged into 1 point in the center of the image, but now it's going to be kind of like you're looking at the image from an angle and how you would draw images like that. So when I say looking at it from an angle, in this one here you can see, I'll make sure I'm on the right layer here. We're looking at kind of this building in the center. We're looking at it on an angle, so we have this corner of the building here. And then if we start following the lines, I'm just going to follow like the window lines of this building. That one was a little crooked. Alright, so you can see I kind of drew out following the lines of this building here, and I went down, and you can see they would meet somewhere outside of the image over here. So you can't actually see the vanishing point in this picture, but we know it exists because we can follow all of the straight lines in the image to that vanishing point. And then we can also find the horizon line, which is down here, which would just be a line that has no angle to it. And then if we did the exact same thing on the other side of the building, following straight lines made by the building, the windows, the road, anything, you can see they would meet somewhere off outside of the image on the right hand side. Okay? And one thing that's important to note is that the horizon line isn't always going to be where the road is. So in this case, if I look at the sidewalk, you can see if I follow the line of the sidewalk, it's actually on an angle leading towards the vanishing point. I'm just going to erase these so we can work with our next drawing. So it's called 2-point perspective because, as you can see, we have all of our lines leading to two different vanishing points, and that creates the effect of looking at an image from a side angle. Alright, so let's do the same thing with this image on the right here. So I'm just going to choose a couple lines and draw some straight lines from them. Let's get maybe the ceiling here. Alright, and let's get them on the other side as well. So you can see in this case both of the vanishing points are also outside of the image. And don't worry, when we do our practice ones, we can place the vanishing points like within the drawings that we're going to make. It just creates like a really distorted image, so it's kind of hard to look at and understand in real life. So for this one, again on the left hand side, we have a vanishing point that's outside the image, same on the right. And if I want to find the horizon line, I would just find a point where the lines have no angles. So in this case, it's right about there in the image. Alright, so let's get our last one here, which is 3-point perspective. So this one's kind of tricky. It's very similar to 2-point perspective. I'm just going to pull up this one. So 2-point perspective, if we look back to this image here and we follow the vertical lines in this image, you can see that they just go straight up and down and they have no angle to them. So meaning there's no distortion. So in real life, what would happen if we started walking closer towards this building and we're looking up at it? It wouldn't look the same anymore. These lines would start to change. So 3-point perspective is going to give us a way to create this effect in drawings. So I'm just going to pull back our image here. So this one here kind of replicates what I just said, walking closer towards a building. And you can see the vertical lines in this image all are on angles and will all eventually come together to a point outside of this image. And it looks very similar to the image that was in 2-point perspective because you can see all of the lines used to help make this building here. They will all come to a vanishing point on the left-hand side of the image. And the same is true on the right-hand side of the image. And if I wanted to find where the horizon line is, I would just find a spot where there's no angle for those lines heading towards a vanishing point. So if I look at this line here, which goes kind of pointed up in this direction here, and this line here, it's pointed down, I know that my horizon line would be somewhere in between these two lines where everything would just be straight. And now this image on the right hand side, so this one does a really good job kind of showing 3-point perspective from above. And it's really easy to see in this picture because you can use the straight lines on the like the streets here to help us draw our grids. So you can see all of the lines as they go out this way. If I drew these for a really, really long way, eventually they would meet at some point really far away to the right. And then the same is true if I start following some of the lines out this way. Oops. You can see that these lines, if I kept drawing them, eventually they would meet somewhere out on the left-hand side over there. And then this one also has the 3rd perspective point when we start drawing the vertical lines in as well. So I'm just going to do these ones in a different color so you can kind of see a little bit clearer. Let's make them red. So if I start following the vertical lines in this image, just choosing any points of any buildings, any straight faces, and following them out, you can see eventually they would all come together at some point down outside the image here. So that's the 3rd perspective point, giving it a sense of the buildings are getting like wider, even though they're not. We know it's just a straight building in real life, but it gives it the effect. Okay, so it's really cool to kind of use perspective to add interesting ways to look at your images when drawing. Stick around for our next assignment. We're going to practice drawing objects in perspective. And I think once you do the drawing, it's going to make your understanding a lot clearer. And you'll hopefully understand perspective better once you've drawn objects in perspective. So stick around for that. Have a good day. Catch you later.